Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I would look to drop this week. The first guy's Grossman at the Detroit Tigers. So Grossman, he got off to a good start early in the year and was a recommended pickup on waivers. So on the season now, 6 home runs, 25 RBIs, 28 runs scored, 8 stolen bases, but only a 227 batting average and a 347 on base percentage. In the last couple weeks here for Grossman, it's been a total train wreck. 1 home run, 5 RBIs, an awful 0.98 batting average, and a 200 on base. So right now, obviously, he's not hitting the baseball, and he's only had 1 hit in his last 6 ball games as Grossman. And fantasy owners, they've already gone out there and dropped him in 7% of fantasy leagues this week. So the first at Milwaukee 0 for 5, June 1st at Milwaukee 0 for 4 with a run, June 3rd at the Chicago White Sox 1 for 4, June 4th at the White Sox 0 for 4 with a run and an RBI, and June 5th at the White Sox 0 for 4 with the Golden Sombrero with 4 strikeouts. So right here, Grossman, he's not producing. He was also benched in June 6th ball game last night. And right now, he's in a total big slump. In early season, it was a fluke, I think, that he was producing. And right now, he's just not getting anything going. And he's an easy drop this week with him hitting 0.98, like I mentioned, in the last couple weeks. The next hitter I would look to drop this week is Gary Cooper of the Miami Marlins. So Cooper, he was a hot waiver wire ad in weeks 8 and 9, but now he hasn't done much over the last few games or weeks for that matter. On the season for Cooper, 5 home runs, 22 RBIs, a 255 batting average, and a 330 on base percentage with 17 runs scored. And in the last week for him, no home runs, 1 RBI, a 143 batting average, and a 250 on base percentage. So Cooper, he's been dropped in 6% of fantasy leagues right now, and I know he was batting 4th or 5th for this Marlin team on most nights, but he's just been struggling, and he's been out of the lineup a lot here, is Cooper, the last couple games. So here's the last few games for him. June 1st at Toronto, 1 for 3. June 2nd at Toronto, 0 for 4. June 3rd at Pittsburgh, 1 for 3 with an RBI. June 4th at Pittsburgh, 0 for 4. June 5th and 6th at Pittsburgh, he didn't play. In June 7th at the Boston Red Sox, 0 for 4 in that one. So right now, he's only had 2 hits in his last 5 games as Cooper, and he's definitely struggling. It was good to see him get off to a good start early in the year. But right now, fantasy owners, I wouldn't have patience with a guy like Cooper, who don't really have a big track record of producing and being fantasy relevant for a whole season. So right now, he's a drop. The next is Kyle Schwarber of the Washington Nationals. So Schwarber, another guy who got off to a roaring start the first few weeks of the season, but right now it's been a slump for him, and he's also been banged up a little on and off with a little bit of a knee injury. So Schwarber, he's been dropped in 2% of fantasy leagues so far this week. And on the season for Schwarber, 9 home runs, 25 RBIs, 20 runs scored, a 222 batting average, and a 310 on base. So the low batting average is definitely something you expect from Schwarber each and every season pretty much. But the power's still pretty much on par with the 9 home runs. And last season we saw him hit only 188. But right now he's just not producing even power with the low average. Over the last couple weeks, 1 homer only, 3 RBIs, 2 runs scored, a 186 batting average, and a 239 on base percentage. So Schwarber, he's one of the players where he has a lot of peaks and valleys, and times where he'll go on a hot streak and hit 300 with 5 homers in a week, and then times like he's doing now where he's not going to hit for power or batting average, obviously. So the last few games for Schwarber, June 1st at Atlanta, 2 for 4 with a run and 2 RBIs. June 2nd at Atlanta, 1 for 3. June 4th at Philly, 0 for 4. June 5th at Philly, 0 for 3. And June 6th at Philly, 0 for 5. So Schwarber in his last 3 ball games just alone, he's 0 for 12 in this time. And he's definitely slumping. He's definitely struggling. And now with the day off yesterday, hopefully at the Tampa Bay Rays, he gets things going. But right now, he's an easy drop, in my opinion, is Schwarber. The next hitter is Alex Kirilloff of the Minnesota Twins. A top prospect in baseball, pretty much, is Kirilloff. And the Twins called him up early in the season, in weeks 1 and 2, I believe it was. And he qualifies at first and outfield for fantasy baseball, which is pretty good versatility. But right here, he's been dropped in 3% of fantasy leagues as Kirilloff. And on the season, 4 home runs, 18 RBIs, 13 runs scored, a 238 batting average, and a 277 on base percentage. So right now, those numbers are nothing to get really excited for. In the last couple weeks for him, has no homers, 4 RBIs, 2 runs scored, 260 batting average, and a 315 on base. So right now, it's not clicking for Krylov at all. I know he's one of the top prospects, like I mentioned, in all of the major leagues. But right now, he's just not getting anything going. And I would drop him with better options on the waiver wire this week. So the last few games here for Krylov: June 1st at Baltimore, 2 for 5 with 2 RBIs. June 2nd at Baltimore, 0 for 3. June 3rd, 0 for 1 in a pinch hit appearance at Kansas City. June 4th at Kansas City, 1 for 5 with a ribby. June 5th at Kansas City, 1 for 4 with a run. And June 6th at Kansas City, 1 for 4. So right here, at most, he's getting 1 hit a game. He's not really driving in runs. And he's putting the ball in play, which is pretty good to see still for a youngster, with a lot of guys striking out when they first come up. But right now, he's just not getting anything going. And he's a recommended drop this week. In the 5th and final hitter, I will look to drop here is David Peralta of the Arizona Diamondbacks. So he's been a street player so far this season, is Peralta. And Peralta, he's been dropped in 3% of fantasy leagues so far this weekend on the season. 4 home runs, 30 RBIs, a 245 batting average, 302 on base, and 25 runs scored. But the last couple weeks here for Peralta, he's been down in the dumps here. No homers, 2 RBIs, 4 runs scored, 100 batting average, and a 143 on base. So he's still going out there. They're playing him every day as Arizona. But he's another player that's just not producing, and he's in a mighty slump right now is Peralta, and he's an easy player to get away from. He hasn't shown power numbers throughout the whole season, with only 4 home runs in pretty much 10 weeks of the season already. And the RBIs, he was off to a quick start early in the year, but right now, he's just not producing that either in the last few games here for Peralta. June 1st versus the Mets, 0 for 3. June 2nd versus the Mets, he pinched hit 0 for 1. June 3rd at Milwaukee, he didn't play in that one. June 4th at Milwaukee, 0 for 3. June 5th at Milwaukee, 0 for 3. And June 6th at Milwaukee, 1 for 4. So Peralta, he's only got 1 hit in his last 6 ball games, and it's been a total mess for him. And this Diamondback team in general were pretty struggling, and they're one of the worst teams in all of Major League Baseball. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Peralta traded at the deadline here in the major leagues. But right now, I wouldn't have him on my fantasy roster unless you're in the deepest of leagues. So that's a few hitters I would look to drop here in week 10 of the fantasy baseball season.